Welcome to RYA training webinar on preparing to restart training activity. This is part 2 and is mainly concerned with small boat training schemes within the RYA. We just wanted to make sure that everyone is still safe and taking care of themselves in this strange and unsettled time. Please do make sure that you carry on keeping yourself up to date by reading the advice and information on the RYA training website, as well as the training support site. As the steps get eased, this information is updated, and so you can revisit these sites at any time to update your information and understanding. Also, there's the social streams that the RYA put out on YouTube, but also on Facebook as well, from the British Sailing team and also from RYA training. So please do take a look at these when you have a moment. I'm doing this training update with myself and Rachel Andrews. So I'm Amanda Van Santen, Chief Instructor for the Sailing and Windsurfing schemes, and with me is Rachel.
Hello everyone, I'm here from the power side, which is power, personal watercraft and inland waterways.
This update is taking a look at the gradual easing from the lockdown as we move from step 1 into step 2, and how this is affecting us across the different countries that we're working within. Just remember that inspections remain postponed for most countries. We've got small pockets of activity that's happening, but within the UK, they still remain postponed. And just to remind you that this update is to do with the small boat training schemes only. So that's windsurfing, sailing, power boating, and PW and inland waterways. It's not to do with the sail cruising scheme. If you haven't watched it already, prior to this webinar was preparing to restart training part 1, which was updated on the RYA website 2 weeks ago. So please watch that first, as that gives you the precursor information to a lot of what Rachel and I are covering on today's update. This slide's made available after this webinar. You'll be able to press on the link of these slides and it will take you directly to the YouTube of that webinar, but as well as the slides as well that you can flick through and get all the hyperlinks from those. So do take a look at those if you haven't seen that webinar before or taken a look at those slides. RYA training promoted a guidance, a trigger list. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's about how you might look to modify your operating procedures during COVID-19 and also then evolving them as the situation evolves itself. It's about stimulating ideas, but also mitigating the risk for yourself as a principal or as a chief instructor. It's not there for you to copy, it's for you to consider when might be the right time for you to restart training, and also what training that might look like and what the areas are that you need to cover to ensure the training is safe for people to come to your centre or club. First and foremost, and it's really important to recognise that actually you need to follow the national and local government advice regards any kind of activity. So the RYA guidance has been taken from local government and public health advice. So in particular at the moment, these elements are social distancing, potential of having to wear protective clothing or equipment, and the effective cleaning that's required with regards to our equipment and any facilities that an individual might be coming into your centre and using. The link to this guidance is at the bottom, and it's also on the RYA training support site, so you can access that information. Some of the steps that we're seeing at the moment are quite gradual, depending on your government's rulings, so they may be different between England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, for example. These easings are generally about social distancing and also the number of people that are allowed to meet. At the moment, most stipulations are around social distancing of 2 meters, and also that activity has to take place outside. the number of people you might be able to teach or meet up with will be very different depending on whereabouts you are operating and in which country you're operating in. So please do observe what your government rules are at this current time and as they evolve. So let's have a look at what might have eased for some people. So we know that within England, the number of people from different households who can meet has eased slightly. So this has changed from from 1-to-1, sorry, to 5 students. So you might now be in a position that you could up the number of students that you have. And this has also obviously opened up to being able to meet people from different households. A really important point is that parents should be accompanying their children to any sessions. They shouldn't be dropping them off and leaving them. A lot of this is to do with the public health guidelines, in the fact that we are still in reduced facilities, so only toilets should be open. There aren't any changing facilities at the moment that are allowed to be open, so children shouldn't be left to get changed on their own outside or anything like that. They should be accompanied. That also means that when you are promoting any activity within your centre, you need to make sure that your students are aware that there aren't any facilities to get changed, or that the provision might be slightly different, and you need to clearly state what that provision is or isn't at the moment and how they're able to get changed to be able to do their activity. As an example, a potential at the moment might be for small groups of RYA tuition to take place in an English RYA training centre, such as 1-to-5 in single-handers or windsurfing groups. Still, what remains is if you were going to use double-handers, they would need to be from the same household only. You could not mix double-handers. The other element that remains is that it's outside only. There's no classroom tuition that's able to take place. So any elements that you would normally do within a classroom would either need to be carried out outside or would not be able to be done at this current time. When you consider all of these elements, it's got to go back to whether it meets the public health guidelines. So are you able to meet the guidelines that are foremost coming from the public health and the government? You need to consider the weather and the group restrictions. So if you don't have any facilities, or the people that you are offering your activity to, is it dependent on the weather being good? So on rainy or cold days, are you still able to offer the same provision, or do you need to reduce that or potentially stop those activities from happening? All of this needs to be very clearly communicated to those that you're advertising to or that you're working alongside. Another consideration at this current time might be instructor training. So do the easings currently allow you to offer some form of instructor training? For dinghy sailing, this wouldn't at this current time be a possibility because you would be using double handers. But there's a potential that windsurfing instructor training could start to take place at this current time. But please do contact RYA Training so that we can give you some guidance on that and also seek to approve it prior to you taking place. I'm just going to bring Rachel Andrews in on the conversation now. Rachel, have you got anything to add to this slide and to what I've just mentioned?
So it's all pretty much the same across the schemes that I look after, in that the only one really that you can get into would be personal watercraft, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. Powerboating is still too difficult under the social distancing, as is inland waterways for the time being. We await changes to that to be able to update our thoughts on how people can deliver training. So nothing further on this particular slide. Okay, so over to personal watercraft. So we've managed to we've taken a decision to give a temporary suspension to the need to sharing a personal watercraft with a student. So for that very first session, when somebody is initially introduced to the ski, normally the instructor would be would first of all be take the controls with the student behind them so that they can see what's going on and experience it, and then afloat, they would change over, and the student would be in the front and the instructor would be at the back, and the instructor would keep hold of the kill cord. So obviously, with social distancing in place, that makes personal watercraft an impossibility. So what we've done is temporarily suspended the need to share that PW. But you're going to need to have a good old think about how you can deliver that first session safely. So some suggestions I've got there would be for introducing those controls remotely. You might want to do a video from the perspective of the rider, so that as you're explaining how the controls work, the person looking at the video is seeing it in the same way as they would if they were riding themselves. Coupled with that, you could also give a dry demonstration, so the instructor on or next to the PW, depending if it's on a trailer, on a floating dock, or in the water, showing where all those controls are and what is required. You could reinforce that by having a laminated and labeled image per student. I say laminated so that we're able to disinfect them afterwards and reuse them. But as your instructor is talking through the controls from on board or next to the ski, the students could be looking at a laminated image to reinforce that information. Next thing to consider would be the starting location. Is it okay to start from where you normally would start from, with the student on the back and heading to your location to do your the familiarization session, or will not work? If you're in a marina environment, that's not going to be a safe thing to do, letting somebody who's never used a personal watercraft take it and navigate themselves out of the marina. So it might be that you need to consider potentially towing the ski out, or some other thoughts to that. That doesn't mean a change of location of the center. It's just how you can get the ski to the point where you'll be able to deliver that training. So have a little think about that. We're on hand if you've got any questions. The next thing is, for the instructor demonstrations, which should happen every time we're teaching a new skill, we've got to have a really good think about that. If the instructor is on their own personal watercraft, then that will be fairly easy. They just need to position the group so that they're far enough apart, remembering that it's a maximum of 3 personal watercrafts of 1 instructor, and you can only have 1 person on each ski unless they're from the same household, in which case they could double up on the personal watercraft. But that might then give you some problems when you go to do the theory in terms of the social distancing ashore, as you're doing that in an outside area, trying to maintain that distance between. If the instructor is demonstrating from a safety boat, if the instructor is on a safety boat and doesn't have a personal watercraft, they're going to need to use a student's ski to give the demonstration. So you've got to put some thought to how the switch can take place, so that they don't come within 2 meters of each other, or whatever the social distancing is in the area you're operating, and also how you're going to disinfect the key touch points on the personal watercraft so that it's safe for the student to recommence the training once the instructor gets off. So thinking about the disinfecting side of things is probably the biggest thing, and how you're going to safely get someone to switch onto a safety boat and the instructor onto the personal watercraft. So all these bits need a little bit of thought, which kind of brings me on to the next slide. Whatever the scheme is that you're delivering in, we absolutely urge you to take your time and to make sure that you've checked all the resources available for that are given out by your government, and anything to do with the local water authority, which could be a harbour master, it could be the management of a particular body of water, making sure that what you're doing is within their guidelines, and that you've taken into account all of the stuff within our restarting boating, so that you're thinking about only opening once you know you can safely do that, because this is all about trying to control a pandemic. So we're trying to minimize the risk of somebody contracting the COVID-19 from having been on a course. We don't want any cross contamination. So it's all about how we can do that, and making sure that we can comply with each of those government restrictions. Absolutely, first and foremost is the social distancing measures. those are what are pretty much holding back all our RYA training at the moment. Until we can get closer than 2 meters to each other, most other training remains out of our reach for the time being. But do watch out for our updates as we move forwards. So here's the advice and guidance that we've got on our website. If you go to the training support site, you'll be able to find lots of information. All of our latest stuff sits on the training support site, and these are all hyperlinks. So as you look at this, you'll be able to click on those and see where all of our information is coming from. But we update the RYA website for general boating. The training support site is updated, which is where you'll find the advice and guidance for restarting RYA training. Then we have guidance for clubs, and we also have the digital culture, media and sport English government department, which is where many of our underpinning advice and guidance comes from. Thank you very much for listening. You'll be able to find this webinar on the training support site, as well as other webinars that are relevant to this. Please take a chance to take a look around the training support site, because many of your questions can be answered there. But if this has thrown up any questions, or you're wondering if there's some things that you might be able to do that you hadn't thought were possible, then please get in contact. We're absolutely happy to help. Thanks for listening.